All right. Under politics, war with Spain, and presidential assassinations, we're going to start with the election of 1876. And as you can see by the sheet, we're going to talk about a lot of elections back to back. This period of history from 1876 on politically is not a great interest to me, and I don't think you're going to see a lot of questions on the AP exam on this period of time. You could on the Spanish-American War, which we will cover, and maybe the presidential assassinations, but the part of history that's interesting to me in 1876 was the Plains Indians Wars, which we actually skipped over because of the Battle of the Bighorn. So we're going to move on to the election of 1876. Now, if you remember back, and we haven't been in school a while, who is the President of the United States at this point? What's that? Thought I heard. Who's the President of the United States at this point? This guy right here. Ulysses S. Grant. And he, as I mentioned in his profile, did not have a very successful presidency. There was a lot of scandals within his presidency. He probably goes down into American history as maybe one of the worst presidents that we ever had politically. And so because of all the scandals during the presidency of Grant, the Democratic Party, who was the opposite party in which he ran, he was a Republican, they were very confident of victory in 1876. They thought they would win simply on the poor job that was perceived that Grant had done during his 2 terms. So the Democrats, when they went to convention, they chose Governor Samuel J. Tilden of New York as their presidential candidate. Democrats chose Governor Samuel J. Tilden of New York as their presidential candidate. And they were pretty confident of victory. They really believed they would do well concerning the Republicans and the presidency of Grant. Republicans countered with a governor also, governor of Ohio, a fellow by the name of Rutherford B. Hayes. So the Democrats are going to choose Governor Samuel J. Tilden of New York as their presidential candidate, and the Republicans are going to counter with Governor Rutherford B. Hayes of Ohio as their candidate. This is going to be a very, very interesting political election. So you can imagine that on a test, this election is going to be a big part of it. Okay? This is a really interesting election. Well, when the smoke cleared, Governor Tilden, the Democratic candidate, received 250,000 more popular votes than Governor Hayes received. So again, in this election, the Democratic candidate, Samuel J. Tilden, governor of New York, actually received 250,000 more popular votes than Hayes. But we all know that popular votes and 50 cents, I think, will buy you a pop in the teacher's lounge, right? So what are we really concerned about? Electoral votes. Well, the first count of electoral votes also gave Governor Tilden the edge, 184 to 165. So when they did the first count of electoral votes, Tilden also won the Electoral College, 184 to 165. Well, the important thing about this for Governor Tilden is he was 1 electoral vote short of majority. Okay? So what happens usually under those circumstances? What happens if somebody doesn't receive the electoral votes? It goes to the House of Representatives. So ordinarily, when no presidential candidate receives the majority needed for election, the House of Representatives makes the choice. We've had that happen a couple times in our lectures. Well, the thing that made this election so unique is there were 4 states that actually sent in 2 sets of returns. Not 1 set like you're supposed to, sent in 2 sets of returns. And those 4 states that sent in 2 sets of returns were South Carolina, Florida, Louisiana, and Oregon. So 4 states sent in 2 sets of return. South Carolina, Florida, Louisiana, and Oregon. Well, what do you think is going to happen because of that? J.C. Page, what do you think they're going to do? Being those 4 states sent in 2 sets of returns. You're going to have to recount. Okay? And how many electoral votes was South Carolina, Florida, Louisiana, Oregon all worked together? 20. So those 20 votes are going to be pretty crucial, don't you think? Because how many does Tilden need? 1. How many does Hayes going to need then? If you do the math, he's going to need all 20. Okay? So this is pretty crucial. So because of this, a recount was scheduled with the 20 crucial electoral votes up for grabs, so to speak. And Governor Tilden needed only 1 of these disputed votes to win. Governor Hayes needed all 20. Well, this is it's just a really interesting story. According to the United States Constitution, all popular votes in those 4 states had to be counted so they could distribute the electoral votes correctly, right? Because each state is worth so many electoral votes, 20 apiece. Well, the people that were going to do this, you think they were just going to let the citizens of those states do it after they screwed up and sent in 2 sets of returns? No. So Congress created what was called an electoral commission. And there were 15 members on that commission. What's another name for a commission? Starts with the same C. Commission, committee, same thing. So Congress created an electoral commission. And there were 15 members on that commission. Now this is interesting because you got to know this to get the whole thing. 5 of those members of that new commission were United States senators. 5 of those members of the Electoral Commission are United States representatives, congressmen, House of Representatives. 5 senators, 5 representatives. The other 5 were Supreme Court justices. So on this Electoral Commission, which consisted of 15 members, you had 5 U.S. senators, 5 United States representatives, and 5 Supreme Court justices. Now, what would be your next question when you're counting on an election that has a Republican candidate running against a Democratic candidate? What would be your next concern about these 15 members of this new commission? Were they Republicans or Democrats? Okay, so let's go back. Of the 5 United States senators that were chosen, obviously they can't be even, right? Because there's 5. 3 were Republicans and 2 were Democrats. So of the 5 United States senators, 3 were Republicans and 2 were Democrats. Which meant that the House would have to go which way? The opposite, right? So in the House there were 2 Republicans and 3 Democrats. So we're even, right? We're even across the board. House has 2 Republicans, 3 Democrats. The Supreme Court had 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and 1 person that was considered nonpartisan, didn't belong to either party. So was everything even? We have the same number of Republicans as Democrats? Perfect. Well, the man that was the nonpartisan member of the commission was Supreme Court Justice David Davis. David Davis was this nonpartisan person. Well, Davis resigned his position because he was elected to the United States Senate. So they replaced him with another Supreme Court Justice. So Supreme Court Justice David Davis, who was a nonpartisan, which is kind of unusual, isn't it? Someone to say they're nonpartisan in a position that high. Okay, he resigned because he was elected to the United States Senate. So they replaced him with a Republican Supreme Court Justice. So who had the advantage? Republicans. Okay? So Davis's place on the commission went to a Republican, which gave that party one more vote than the Democrats. What do you think the Democrats thought about that?
Not good.
Didn't like it. Now, this is how weird it gets. Because they can't get any consensus or know they're not going to, this commission or committee simply makes a deal. They just strike a deal. They don't vote or anything, just strike a deal. Now, the Democrats, believe it or not, agreed to accept Rutherford B. Hayes as president. The Democrats. Does that make sense to you? The Democrats agreed to accept Republican Rutherford B. Hayes as president. This is 1876. Why would they do that? Why would the Democrats agree to allow the person that didn't win in the Electoral College or the popular vote, why would they allow him to be president? Why would the Democratic Party do that? Because they would want what? Something in return. And they got these three things. So if the Democrats on the Electoral Commission would agree to make Rutherford B. Hayes President of the United States, these are the things they would receive. Now, even though it's 1876, there are still federal troops in the South after the Civil War. And the southern states were predominantly made up of Democrats, didn't like those troops still in the South. So the first condition of allowing Rutherford B. Hayes to be President of the United States was that all federal troops in the South would be withdrawn. That's one thing the Democratic Party got out of this, is they agreed to take all federal troops out of the South. Now, if you were a Democratic Southerner, what other deal might you make if Rutherford B. Hayes becomes president? Even though your candidate had more popular votes and more electoral votes. What might be another deal? That's a good guess, but that's a very good guess, but they wouldn't have a Democratic vice president, but you're close. They wanted Hayes to appoint a fair number of Democrats, especially Southern Democrats, into his cabinet. Because he's going to pick a cabinet, is he not? And the deal was, if we allow him to be president, he would appoint a fair share of Southern Democrats into his presidential cabinet. So that wasn't far off, Dalton. They just wouldn't have a, Democratic vice president. What did the South do to? What did the North do to most of the Southern railroads during the Civil War? Destroyed them. So the third deal, the third condition, is the North would agree to build and finance a railroad across the South. So once the Republicans said, yeah, we'll withdraw all federal troops in the South, yes, we will agree to appoint a fair share of Southern Democrats to President Hayes' cabinet, and yes, we will build a railroad and pay for it across the South. Once that was done, Rutherford B. Hayes became President of the United States, despite the fact his opponent received a majority of the popular vote and more electoral votes. Only time in American history that's ever occurred, where the person that was defeated actually won both the popular vote and the Electoral College. Okay, a little odd there, so you can probably count on that. I'm going to tell you a few things about President Rutherford B. Hayes before we talk about how his administration went. And you can tell by the next subtopic how well did it go.
Not good.
Not good. Okay. Anyway, President Hayes' wife became the first lady to have earned a college education. President Hayes' wife became the first lady to have earned a college degree. This is going to really tie into you, Emily, here in just a minute. Second thing about President Hayes is he and his wife had 8 children. A lot of children. Not that. We're going to get on. 8 children. Maybe you will have it. By God, you should.
No. I'm good.
Anybody want to guess what famous university Rutherford B. Hayes was very instrumental in founding? Think about where he's from. Ohio State University. Okay, Rutherford B. Hayes helped found or develop Ohio State University. President Hayes was also the first U.S. president to have a telephone in the White House. First U.S. president to have a telephone in the White House. And the last two have to do with his wife, Mrs. Hayes. You ever heard of the traditional, very famous Easter egg roll on the lawn of the White House every year? She was the one that originated the first Easter egg roll on the lawn of the White House. She was the one that started that tradition, which is a very famous tradition. Two things the president does that gets a lot of press: the Easter egg roll during Easter and the pardoning of the Thanksgiving turkey. They always, what will happen is a poultry grower in the area will have the honor of supplying the turkey for the president for Thanksgiving. They actually supply two. They supply one live one that he pardons, and they send him back to the poultry, and then they cook another one. They don't cook the one that he pardons, you see. This kind of a thing they do, okay? Now, the second thing, the First Lady, Emily, had the nickname Lemonade Lucy.
No.
She had the nickname Lemonade Lucy. Anybody want to guess why? At times, but there was a reason why she made the lemonade if she made it. When people came up to the White House to visit, she would make lemonade and other such beverages of non-alcoholic nature because she would not allow alcoholic beverages in the White House. So she was given the nickname Lemonade Lucy because she did serve a lot of her guests lemonade because she would not allow alcohol in the White House. Just some tidbits about the Hayeses. Okay? Okay, let's go to our next subtopic then, which is difficulties for President Hayes. President Hayes' presidency, which lasted just 4 years, was incredibly difficult. He did not have a very positive presidency. What usually causes a president not to have a good positive presidency? Even today, and we're seeing it with the health care bill that they tried to repeal of President Obama's. It failed. They didn't get enough Republican votes. Okay, what kills a president's administration lots of times? Who does he have to work with, or she? Right, absolutely. If you don't control Congress, in other words, if you're a Republican president and have a Democratic-controlled Congress, and what I mean by that is a Democratic-controlled House and a Democratic-controlled Senate, you have tough times because we're not as bipartisan as we should be. So throughout his administration, the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives and the Democratic-controlled Senate just caused him havoc during his presidency. Now, the House of Representatives was controlled by Democrats all 4 years of his presidency, and 2 of the 4 years of his presidency, the Senate was controlled by the Democrats. They have elections, midterm elections, not to tie in with the presidential election. Okay, so he had a heck of a time because in most instances he fought a Democratic-controlled Congress. Not only that, think about this, because the deal was made to make him be president, do you think he had full support of the Republicans even? No, he really didn't. So not only did he struggle with the Democratic-controlled Congress, he had opposition from members of his own party as well. He wasn't a president that was elected in any way, shape, or form properly, right? Well, the Republicans were very split. And the election of 1876, because a lot of Republicans didn't like the way that went, because they didn't want to give up those 3 things. You see what I'm saying? It's not that they didn't maybe want their candidate in the White House. They didn't really like giving up the 3 things they had to give up. So the results of the election of 1876 and the aftermath really split the party in half. Half the party were referred to as stalwarts, and the other half of the party were referred to as half-breeds. So the Republican Party was very, very split after the election of 1876. and it's split into two groups. One group of Republicans referred to themselves as the stalwarts. The other half referred to themselves as the half-breeds.
Why would you name yourself half-breeds?
Now, obviously, one half are going to be in support of President Hayes, and one half are not. The stalwarts were the group that were against the Hayes administration. They even referred to him as Granny Hayes. Made fun of him all the time and called him Granny Hayes. Not very much respect there. So the stalwarts were against the Hayes administration and the president, and often referred to the president as Granny Hayes. The half-breeds were supportive of President Hayes, and they were led by James G. Blaine of Maine and John Sherman of Ohio. So the half-breeds were supportive of the president and his administration, and they were led by James G. Blaine of Maine and John Sherman of Ohio. But as you can see, he had a tough go, did he not? When you have half your party against you, you got no shot, let alone have the Democratic control Congress. Okay, that'll take us to the election of 1880 then. And do you think the Republicans are going to go for Rutherford B. Hayes for re-election? Not at all. Matter of fact, prior to the election, the two names being thrown around by the Republicans for the nomination were former President Grant, believe it or not, and James G. Blaine, who was the Republican leader of the half-breeds. Okay? So when the Republicans were trying to consider a candidate in 1880, they certainly were not going to go